So hi, welcome to the Q to Work Profiles, where we talk to different people working in quantum or with quantum backgrounds about what they do and how they got there. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Joelle Corrigan from the University of Wisconsin. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course, I'm happy to be here.
So just to start out, would you mind telling us kind of what you do and what your current role is?
Yeah, so I am a fifth-year graduate student in a PhD program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, working with Professor Mark Erickson, where we are using quantum dots in semiconducting systems like silicon to then use as a platform to make qubits, with the ideas of, making a quantum computer one day. So my research has been primarily focused with that, with, controlling electrons within these quantum dots, with, high frequency equipment and like special pulses and whatever to get these electrons to interact with each other. And I've also recently been doing work also with quantum dots that are then coupled to a superconducting cavity and doing, similar investigations of that sort of interaction. So a lot of fun buzzwords.
And so you're just finishing up grad school now. And so what are your next steps?
Exactly. I'm finishing up and I'm very excited to be moving to Intel and joining the quantum group there, where they are also looking at using quantum dots in silicon and semiconducting systems to make qubits and look towards the quantum computers. So I'm super excited to be able to continue that work and join the team out there.
Awesome. And so for students who might be in high school and, just hearing about semiconductors, maybe for the first time or even in college, this all sounds potentially very advanced to them. And so how did you get to this career path? Were you always fascinated by physics, or what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I feel like I've gone on this really sort of random, windy path to where I am right now. I actually applied for undergrad for psychology. I thought, even though I had never taken a psych class, but I was like, I like talking to people and helping people, probably that'll be good. And then through some other sort of crazy chain of events, I ended up in a physics class my first semester at Hamilton College in upstate New York. And I just fell in love with the professor there. He did a bunch of demos and it was, we were really understanding what it meant to explain the world in terms of these like physics equations and really what's going on at the fundamental level. I was like, this is cool. Yeah, this is kind of fun. I should take another class and just see what happens. And as I progressed, I guess in the next year, I took a quantum mechanics class, my first one, my sophomore year. And I was like, this is, it's one thing to say, okay, if I throw a ball and it goes over there, then like, that's what happens. But to understand that like at the most fundamental level, the world, it's made of these really small particles and they have their own set of rules that's so different from everything we know. Things can go through walls, which just sounds crazy. Your ball isn't going to fly through a wall when you throw it. And there's all of this, really cool equations, and it just sounded like a really interesting topic. At that point, I was like, okay, I should be a physics major. But even then, I was like, but I'm not going to go to grad school. And if I went to grad school, it would be for engineering, because I thought that physics was all very equation based. And I was like, I want to do something hands-on, something really applied that I can see the thing that I'm doing is going to be important for the world. And I think my advisor at the time kind of saw that in me, saw that my misunderstanding of what it could mean to be a physicist. He encouraged me to do this summer undergraduate opportunity at NIST in Maryland. And when I was there, I was working at their neutron beam and surrounded by all these people with their PhDs in physics, like doing really cool research in different material systems. I was like, I would just come home to my friends who are not physicists and just talk about it and be like, this is so cool. They're doing this thing. I can't believe it, And I sort of realized that like, okay, if I can't stop talking about this subject, and like, clearly I'm excited about it. And I guess that means that I had to go do my PhD in physics. I was very resigned to like, if you find that spark, even if it means another 5 years of school, you kind of have to follow it and do that exciting thing. So then I was sort of resigned, but I was kind of broadly interested in condensed matter, which is like material systems generally, because it felt more applied and more of this, experimental focus. And so I applied to a bunch of condensed matter systems, and then one of the locations that I applied to was Wisconsin, and the group I was most interested in was this group where they're doing this crazy thing called quantum computing and qubits and whatever. And I was like, this is exactly the type of physics I love, this quantum mechanics, but it's in the lab. I'm doing very hands-on things, and the measurements we do are these exact manifestations of our equations that I thought were so crazy. That's how the world worked. So I really, I really fell into physics, and I really fell into this field. So I knew kind of nothing about it before I joined in graduate school, and it's been this whole new world. And it's really an exciting time to be doing this type of physics. So I'm really lucky that somehow the stars have aligned to guide me here, you know.
So there's a couple things I want to touch on that you just mentioned, but one of them is kind of walk me through what an every day in your life is like, and also what's the most exciting thing that you get to work on.
Yeah, so one of the things I like the most about a field like this, that's very being an experimentalist in a field like this, is you wear so many hats. And so even, I guess, one day itself, you might be doing a lot of similar things, but like across, you know, a week or a month or something, you are dealing with cryogens, because these systems have to be really, really cold, like in the, you know, tens of millikelvin temperatures. So you're dealing with things like liquid nitrogen, liquid helium to keep that cold. Or these systems have, you know, a lot of pumps and tubing and piping. And so a lot of times I feel kind of like a plumber. And then there's all of the electronics that are on your racks, and you are, you know, plugging them in with cables, or also programming them, or, you know, controlling, making these really complex waveforms to send down to your system. And so those are all the very like hardware things. Sometimes you're even like in there with a wrench and a screw, you know, like feels very, very hands-on mechanical, but then sometimes you're taking data, and that's a lot of like on the computer, sort of a lot of things are coding based. And then you are trying to find sort of the needle in the haystack, get that signal that you can develop on and chase. And then when you are taking data and things are working, then you have to analyze it. So that's also a lot of like, you know, maybe making models and like fits, and trying to extract the information from the data that you took. So it's really this broad range of so many different different skills.
And so for people who are just hearing about quantum or quantum computing for the first time, what are some problems in quantum that you're really excited about, or applications that you see coming in like the next 10 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of, I think, exciting challenges in sort of progressing the field. So there's a lot of different groups that have, you know, in the tens of qubits amount. And what we need to get to the end goal, it's going to be the millions, you know, like that's a quite large scale amount. So there's going to be a lot of focus, I think, on things like multiplexing, where you can actually send down and control many different qubits or like parts of your system with a single cable. It's been a lot of proof of concept. And so now it's like, okay, now that we know this could work, how are we going to get it to work on this larger scale to get this million number that we need to solve all those really hard problems?
And I guess, do you think, in your perspective, that it's a unique time in quantum? Like, would you think it's a good time to go into it? And how do you see the field changing in the next, you know, 5-ish years?
Yeah, I definitely think that it is a great time to go into it. I mean, I think it's something that is really exciting. It's really on the minds of so many of these, you know, companies and universities and government labs. And there's a lot of growth. I mean, there's a lot of money being put into it, which is a good thing in terms of like finding jobs, even as a graduate student, and funding like that. But I think it is this really unique time where it's like kind of being in a startup environment, you know, like, again, we have the proof of concept, and now we got to get to this much larger step, and it's going to take a lot of really hard work, but it's a lot of really exciting, I think, challenges to join into. And I'm not going to make any bets about like, oh, if you wait a year or 5 years or 10 years, like it'll be too late. I don't know the future in that way, but I think if it's something that you're interested in, it's a great time to join. And, you know, people like me, I didn't know anything about it before I joined this group. And so don't feel like, oh, well, I've never taken, or I don't know anything about quantum computing or whatever. Another thing I'll say is that there's so many different angles to this problem. So it's like, I have been a very in the lab hardware, you know, measurement type of person. There's also a bunch of people thinking about like the algorithms that will need to be produced once we have things. You know, we're trying to like a quantum computer work in parallel and like have a lot of skill sets built up at the same time. And so even if you're like, well, I don't really like dealing with instruments or dealing with cryogens, I just like to think about it more in the abstract. There's a lot of stuff to pursue still in the field in that way. So don't let my very experimental brain scare you away.
So my next question is kind of in two parts, kind of in different age groups. So the first one is, do you have any advice to students who are maybe in early high school who are interested in potentially pursuing a career in STEM and maybe even quantum? So any advice for that age group?
Yeah, I mean, I would say do it. Obviously, I still ended up here even thinking I wasn't going to do physics at all. I mean, okay, I think I wish in retrospect, I wish I had more teachers in high school telling me what the opportunities would be like, what it would mean to be a physicist. You know, I maybe had a vague idea of what it would mean to be an engineer. I didn't really know what it meant to like pursue science research as a career. And especially this world of quantum, I think it is really exciting. And I don't know how many high schoolers know about it. And so I think if it's something that, I mean, any of these, if it's, you know, even if you have never thought about science as a career for yourself, but you like science or you do well in your classes or you like math or you find problem solving like a fun thing to do, you know, puzzles, stuff like that, I would totally encourage you to pursue, because there's so much stuff that I think as a high schooler, you don't really get exposed to until maybe you go to undergrad. And especially when you go to graduate school, you realize that there's this whole world out there of different opportunities that you can pursue that like is actually just getting to solve problems for your job. I think if I knew that as a high schooler, I would have been like, oh yeah, obviously that's what I want to do, because these are all the things that I like either in classes or outside of classes.
And then kind of building on that, this is a question that you're now in your career particularly uniquely suited to answer. What advice would you give students who are just entering graduate school in these PhD programs in STEM?
Yeah, it's going to be hard, but it is really worth it. I think it's important to find the things that, you know, make it so you can't stop talking, the things that like really excite you. I think going to graduate school in a topic or something that you think you're like, oh, this is fine, and I can just, you know, struggle through this for however many years and it'll be fine. Like there are going to be hard times, and you need to have sort of that light to drive you through. And I think it's finding those things that, you know, make it worth it.
So our last question is not related to quantum at all, but we always ask everyone, how have you been surviving this past year? What do you do outside of work when you're not in the lab? Any hobbies?
Yeah, it's a good question. A big thing that's helped me, so I like music a lot. I used to do choir a lot. Clearly you can't do choir in COVID, and that's just like not gonna work out. So we recently bought a piano. I hadn't taken piano lessons since like high school, but it's been really fun to see, I guess, all of that knowledge still stored in my brain, and like, you know, pursuing that hobby again, being able to come home and still, you know, have that musical outlet. But otherwise, you know, things like running or yoga to sort of like get me outside the lab and in the sunshine. And definitely, you know, I like travel a lot. So we've done a lot of like car camping and like, okay, we're just going to drive to this place, or we're going to, you know, go on this hike or something to at least like feel like we're in a different location and stuff. So those have been some of our, the things that I've been doing to sort of stay sane and feed some of those interests that maybe seem like they should be prohibited by COVID, but you can find your loopholes, you know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been really interesting talking, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much.